Okay.
Recording in progress.
Good morning. Welcome to the March 5th, 2026 meeting, ARB meeting. Can we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Chair Chen,
Present.
Vice Chair Adcock,
Present.
Board Member Hirsch. Here. Board Member Joji.
Present.
Board Member Rosenberg.
Present.
For the record, we have quorum.
Thank you. And next is agenda changes, deletions for this meeting.
Good morning. We do have a deletion, so that is the 450 Lytton Avenue, so that item will not be heard at this meeting.
Okay, thank you. And next is the public comment. This is the time for anyone who wants to speak an item that is not on the agenda today. If you want to speak an agendized item, you will have time later this morning. Thank you. Do we have any?
Through the chair, I do not have any raised hands on Zoom.
Okay, thank you. And next is city official reports. I will hand it over to Stephen.
All right. Well, good morning. It's been a while since we've had a meeting, so welcome back. Here we are in March on the 5th, the first meeting of the month. I just have a few upcoming items that I want to note here. At our March 19th meeting, we'll have the San Antonio Road Area Plan Study Session, and there will be a joint meeting next week with the Planning and Transportation Commission on March 11th for the Coverly Master Plan. And I've pulled from that staff report some of our 2026 meeting schedule. If there's any planned absences in the upcoming months, please direct that to staff's attention.
I will be absent on June 18th.
I will also be absent on June 18th. Same.
Well, thank you. Seems like we won't have quorum, so we'll have to cancel. All right. If any other arrangements or plans come up, please direct that to staff's attention. And with that, I can entertain any further questions.
Is there any questions for now? No? Okay, then we will just move on to our first action item today. It is a quasi-judicial 4103.
Through the chair, sorry about that. I just wanted to make a brief point of order. It looks like through the Zoom, we may have had a delay in attendees joining, so I'm not sure if any of those were people that wanted to make remarks.
Oh, okay, so.
Yeah, for general public comment, I meant to say. Yeah, and I wanted to just check in with staff.
Yeah, so to the public, if you have public comments, this is for anyone who has comments that is not on, if you want to speak on an item that is not on the agenda today, you can speak now. But if you want to speak about a project that we will discuss later today, you will have time later today.
And if you're online, please raise your hand to indicate your interest in speaking on items not on the agenda.
And through the chair, I do not see any raised hands. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And now we will move on to our action item, which is the 4103 Old Trace Road. Request for a streamlined housing development review to construct 18 dwelling units on 8 total lots, including 8 single-family residence and 8 junior ADU. 1 single-family home and JADU would be provided at below market rate. A separate vesting tentative map application has been filed for the proposed subdivision. The project requests concessions and waivers pursuant to state density bonus law. A compliant SB 330 pre-application was filed on October 1st, 2025. And this project is exempt from the CEQA pursuant to AB 130. And this is a study session. So I will hand it over to staff for staff report. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nishita Kandikuppa. I'm the project planner on the Streamlined Housing Development Review application for 4103 Old Trace Road. And I will be quickly providing a background on the project location, the scope of work, and the related state law considerations and constraints. This project is located on the corner of Arastradero Road and Old Trace Road within the Esther Clark Park neighborhood. The subject property is currently vacant and is zoned for low-density residential, specifically the residential estate zoning district. The surrounded uses to the east, west, and south are all low-density residential within the RE zoning district, whereas to the north of the property is a technology office and the research park. Further east, we have 2 public schools, and to the further west, we have Research Park zoning district primarily. A quick timeline of the project. The applicant submitted a compliant SB 330 application in late September of 2025, which freezes development standards at the time of application submittal and limits the number of public hearings. Within 180 days of the submittal, the applicant submitted the formal application for streamlined housing review, along with a vesting tentative map for the proposed lot subdivision. In late January 2026, upon revising their first rendition of the plans, they submitted another application, which was deemed complete in late February. And they also requested consideration under Assembly Bill 130 or AB 130 for a CEQA exemption. And that brings us to today, which is March 5th, for the ARB study session. And the vesting tentative map is scheduled or anticipated to go to council in May. This is tentative, but the Streamlined Housing Development Review is processed at staff level. The project proposes to subdivide a vacant 1.02 acre lot into 8 residential lots and 1 private street for access. The 6 of the lots are proposed with a detached single-family home with junior ADUs, and 2 units are attached single-family homes with JADUs. One of the 2 single-family homes and JADU units will be deed-restricted for households making no more than 100% of the area median income. This meets the requirement for the 15% of the base units, which is 8 primary homes, to be below market rate. Including the JADUs, a total of 16 units are proposed on site. This unit table summarizes the square footages of the proposed single-family homes and JADUs by lot. The BMR unit on Lot 5A has been highlighted, and that is the smallest of the units proposed and also the smallest by lot area. The largest lot area is on Lot 3, and the largest residence is proposed on Lot 2. In terms of vehicle parking, all lots except lots 5A and 5B have been provided with 2-car garages, either below or above grade. Lots 5A and 5B are proposed with 1-car garages. The applicant is also seeking several density bonus waivers to deviate from the residential estate development regulations, including but not limited to the setbacks, daylight plane requirements, floor area ratio, lot coverage, and also the location of parking. Here is a site plan of the proposed development, starting from the southwest corner, which is Lot 1, going anti-clockwise towards the northwest corner, which is Lot 7. The private road can be accessed from both Old Trace Road as well as Arastradero, and provides access to all the lots. I will quickly run through the lots and the floor plans. So lots 1, 2, and 3 have 3 habitable floors. There is a basement, a first floor, and a second floor. The JADU is proposed in the basement for all 3 of these lots with a separate exterior entrance, which is required by state law. Lots 1, 2, and 3 also have 2-car garages that are subterranean, which is not permitted per the parking regulations in the code, but the applicant is requesting a waiver for this. Here's a floor plan for Lot 2. and then the floor plan for Lot 3. Lots 4, 6, and 7 have 2 habitable floors, so they don't have a basement, only a first and a second floor. And JADUs are proposed on the first floor for all 3 lots. 2-car garages are proposed, but on the first floor and are permitted by code. Lots 5A and 5B are attached single-family homes with JADUs on the first floor, and 1-car garages are also proposed on the first floor. The applicant has not currently shown any uncovered parking for these lots, but staff is in conversation with the applicant to determine if this would be feasible, potentially providing an uncovered space in the driveway. A quick look at Lot 6 and at Lot 7. The streetscape depicts the proposed development as seen from Old Trace Road. To the left is Lot 7, and to the right is Lot 1. And this is the look from Arastradero. To the left is Lot 5B, and to the right are Lots 6 and 7 going left to right. And here's a proposed rendering of the project. The architect is proposing 3 architectural styles across the development with a mix of modern, Spanish modern, and contemporary. The material samples have been provided to the board for consideration. The ARB's purview is limited by some state laws which apply to this project. Since the project is a streamlined housing development application under the Housing Accountability Act and the state density bonus, the project may not be denied based on inconsistencies with the zoning code or the comprehensive plan. Under state density bonus law, the applicant may request as many waivers as needed to meet the project scope and the density, and the applicant is also permitted to request 1 concession with the justification of cost reduction. Lastly, the AB 130 CEQA exemption sets strict timelines for review and exempts qualifying infill projects from further environmental review. Staff is reviewing the project's eligibility under AB 130 and is currently consulting with the Tamian Nation in accordance with tribal consultation provisions under AB 130. The consultation is expected to be completed in April of 2026. Staff requests the ARB to conduct a study session and provide feedback on the proposed project in further compliance with ARB and city objective standards under streamlined housing review. This concludes the staff presentation. The applicant team has prepared a presentation as well and will go next. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. And do we have any questions to the staff at this moment? Sure, go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you for your presentation. Very helpful. I'm curious about, could you please, I'm curious about the SB 330. I thought that we had sort of gotten to this point where everything that had been applied for was sort of in the queue. This feels like it's a pretty recent application for the SB 330, and so I just wanted a little bit of clarity and understanding to ourselves and to the public as to go over that and how that application works and what the sort of boundaries are of that. So.
Sure. So the SB 330 is a mechanism to kind of freeze some zoning standards. Probably what you're referring to would be builder's remedy, and those are, if you want to call it, say, static. We've reached our limit of applications that were eligible for that period of time when the city didn't have a certified housing element. So if we're thinking about this project, it was freezing zoning standards at the time of application, and they're pursuing some other items. So the state density bonus law does allow some of those waivers and concessions that are pretty similar to builder's remedy, but it is a different mechanism at the state level for housing.
And then just to clarify again for ourselves and for the public, they can request as many waivers as they want, and there's a slight difference between the waivers and the concessions. Can you please sort of reiterate that a little bit?
Sure. So,
sorry for the pop quiz. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
No, this is great information. So waivers would be something that potentially could preclude the project's density as proposed. A cession would be some financial constraint that the project, if it were to be built out at that, say, size or lot constraint, maybe a setback, a daylight plane, it's more financial driven. So they require some justification, and depending on the density of the project, it would be limited. So for this project, they're eligible for one concession, where some projects could be eligible for 2 or 3 based on their densities, so.
Okay, and then basically that density is something that's proposed by the applicant, right? So if they came in and they said, we want to build an 8-story apartments, is that something that could have been proposed on this lot, or is this limited in some way to being these single-family homes?
So, I mean, it's largely market-driven, but also the property being selected and the zoning standards would determine what a density could have on a given site. So, if we're talking about this site, having an 8-story building probably would not be in the plans or within following the zoning standards, but.
But the concept that these are single-family homes, they still can have those exemptions of being a little bit taller than something that would be, if this was built as one single-family home because of the extra density, because of the SB 330, they are allowed to reduce those setbacks, increase height limits, things like that.
Yes, they're allowed to request those waivers for those things that you just noted.
How much of those do we have to grant?
Well, getting some great questions here.
Well,
Maybe,
we'll get the lawyer now.
yeah, let's get the lawyer involved on that.
Madeline Salah, Deputy City Attorney.
Thank you, ma'am.
The city is very constrained in the basis for which it can deny a waiver. It can deny a request for a waiver if granting it would violate state or federal law, or if there would be a adverse impact on health and safety that's not possible to mitigate while having the waiver granted.
Great. Thank you, and I appreciate the I can see we've got a lot of people in the gallery today, so I just wanted to go over some of those notes and make sure that we covered them and we're all on the same page as we move forward with the discussion, so thank you.
Yeah, and a follow-up question.
Yeah, same. You go first.
Yeah, go ahead.
On a more nitty-gritty level, the drawings show a sidewalk. Is that part of the requirements for this particular site?
The applicant is showing a sidewalk along Arastadero Road. It's not a requirement, but during the first round of review, Transportation and myself from Planning had commented on better circulation for pedestrians on the site, and to connect the existing bike and ped pathway on the north side of Arastadero. So in the second rendition of the plans, the applicant proposed a sidewalk along Arastadero. And there are some conversations, with the applicant that we're having to see if they can also provide sidewalks to the, on Old Trace Road. But we did also note that there's no existing sidewalks along Old Trace Road, so it wouldn't be improving circulation off-site. It would provide further circulation on-site, but not really connect any existing sidewalk network on Old Trace.
Thanks, that's understandable now. The AMI, what are the numbers that the city uses for that?
So the adjusted median income, the AMI, would be garnered from the county, so Santa Clara County. The state provides those numbers each year, and they're adjusted, for either inflation or any other changes that would occur, and those are given to us by the state. So if you're asking about the specific, say, the affordability requirements and what that range would be for this project, we can look into that and give you that range.
Those are usually determined by something called neighborhood, but you clarified that it is by law required for Santa Clara County to, so that's certainly a lower number than Palo Alto in itself.
Well, I mean, it definitely is countywide, so capturing larger than just the Palo Alto jurisdiction, yes.
Okay.
Thank you. I have a question kind of regarding the state density bonus law as well, because if I read this correctly, then using the state density bonus law that gives them the opportunity to have all these waivers also requires that the unit that is the 100% AMI has to be an average size, which is the reason why they get all of these waivers. But then the unit that they're proposing is not an average size, right? It's the smallest of the units. So how does the city kind of, make sense of that if the whole reason that they're getting all of these waivers does not meet the requirement for getting these waivers?
So I'm going to step in and I'm going to invite the other staff to correct or add if needed. But Jennifer Armour, Assistant Director for Planning. We have local regulations about units, affordable units being distributed and of the different kinds similar to the regular units. And so any of those types of local regulations are the kinds that they can request a waiver from. I will invite my colleagues whether there is anything in the state law that requires them to be equivalent, because it may be that it is just the local regulations in this case.
Since the applicant had requested a concession to deviate from that requirement, we had consulted with the attorneys at the city, and we did get response that the HCD has directed that we cannot deny concessions up to a certain extent, and I would also invite the attorneys to comment on that. But yeah, we did kind of have these conversations with the applicant and the attorneys.
Sure, so I can add a little bit to that, but it might take a minute because the attorney that was having those conversations with HCD is not me, so I'll get back to you. Okay.
If no more questions to the staff at this moment, we will move on to applicant presentation. To the applicant, you will have 10 minutes, and please state and spell your name for the record, please. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Melanie Griswold, and that's spelled Melanie. Last name Griswold, Griswold. Good morning, members of the board. Thank you for those great questions, and thank you for the opportunity to present today. My name is Melanie Griswold, and I'm one of the development members behind the Oaks, which is the residential subdivision that you see before you today at 4103 Old Trace Road. Joining me today online is Taylor Carpenter, our architect, Brian Ballerini, civil engineer, and Karen Aitken, the landscape architect. And they'll be here to answer any questions, and Taylor's going to do a little presentation on the architecture. I just want to start with some personal context. So I've lived in the Bay Area for 25 years. I currently live in the South Bay. I've worked in Palo Alto when I was a criminal prosecutor, and I have a deep appreciation for the beauty and what Palo Alto has to offer. This subdivision is named the Oaks, and that's a nod to the landscape and natural beauty of the area, which we really appreciate. It's something that we've tried to preserve in the subdivision and not removing any mature trees any more than we absolutely have to. So we've actually shifted around the homes to make sure that we can avoid the perimeter and avoid additional removal of trees. We've proposed the name of Rose Drive, which is named after my young daughter, and that is something, in designing the subdivision, I really wanted it to be something that's unique, that's something that's not a cookie cutter. We could have done, I think, up to 32 units on this site and done something much more dense, but it was important to us, although we understand it is not perhaps what the neighborhood wants in terms of one home per 1 acre. but it is still that small lot, single-family feel, and that is something that we think is aesthetically appropriate. If not, we appreciate that it's an upzoning for this particular area. But something that when my daughter goes past this subdivision, I want her to be proud of it, and I want to be able to be proud of it as well. Can I have the next slide? As mentioned, we have 8 single-family homes, 8 junior ADUs, 16 total dwelling units, and in part that is driven by the CEQA exemption. So we have a minimum number of dwelling units that we need to hit in order to be CEQA exempt. And so while we might have liked to have done 6 single families, in order to get the CEQA exemption, we need to be at 8. So that's, it's a bit driven by state law, but that is part of the rationale for having the 8 units on the subdivision. If I could have the next slide. As mentioned, we have strived to have individual character, and one of the things that we've done is narrow the private street, because I really do believe that while we like to have nice wide streets, it's really important to have as much greenery as possible. And so by having a narrower street, it allows us to have more of the front landscaping and more of those elements that I think is going to add a lot of natural beauty to this subdivision. Next slide. And so the homes that we've designed are designed with multi-generational living in mind. They have junior ADUs, they have first floor en-suites. They really are a type of home where you could have multi-generations living in the home. And of course, as we mentioned, we have the on-site BMR unit, which is being included in the subdivision. Can I have the next slide? One aspect that is not really part of your package, but is something that I think is going to be a real beautification to the neighborhood, is that we have opted to commission an on-site public art piece. So we're not going to be paying the fee, but we're going to be contracting with Stephen Galloway. He's a local artist. He is somebody whose work is listed on the city website. And he has just really, really great, unique items, very nature-focused, that we want to incorporate likely into the front-facing fencing along Arrastradero. So it's something that when people are driving by the subdivision, they're going to see something that is unique. We have, as much as we can, hopefully done proactive community outreach. So we've had numerous meetings with neighbors in their homes. We understand that this is something that's different, that it is perhaps not what all the neighbors would like to see on the subdivision at this location. However, we've done our best to provide information, to answer questions, and to the extent that we can, to incorporate comments. As mentioned, the project is going to include pedestrian and bicycle improvements, particularly along Arrastradero, which we hope will improve safety. And with that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to Taylor Carpenter. I think she is online, and hopefully she can walk through the architecture, the design. I really love her stuff, and hopefully you will too.
Okay, thank you. And just a reminder, you will have only four minutes left, so please watch your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. So as Melanie mentioned, for our project, it was really important to us that we created individual character and created variety within the development, but variety that was also complementary to the surrounding neighborhood and to the natural environment. And so Nishida mentioned this as well, but we created 3 different architectural concepts. While each home itself has a unique floor plan, no 2 floor plans are the same on this development. And so that in combination with these 3 different exterior concepts helped us to create that character and variety. And so we have a Spanish modern concept, a contemporary concept, and then a modern one. And then some additional 3D views from Arrastradero and Old Trace Road. And so we wanted to, with the color palette, we chose a natural color palette, while we still wanted to create some contrast. And site plan, and then some additional street views. And then in the back of the lot where we, due to the grade, we have basements, we wanted to make sure that the design of these, we created a lot of layering to kind of soften the building feeling taller because of the grade. And so we continued that through lots 1 through 3, with a modern Spanish and then another modern concept. And then here is one of our contemporary exteriors. And again, each of our buildings has different formwork and architectural articulation that's creating layering and depth throughout the site. And then with the exterior finishes, we again wanted to select a natural color palette, still creating some contrast. So we have 3 different stone selections, 3 different stuccos, and then we're utilizing some wood grain siding as well to create some natural warmth. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
One thing, maybe, I know it looks like I've got just a little bit more time. So I just want to talk about the garages and the subterranean garages. So this site has a fairly significant grade on the lots 1 through 3. And as we were designing it, it was very, very difficult to come up with something that was attractive with all the garages being at the front. And so we took the suggestion of another architect that we were working with initially to move the garages to the subterranean level. It's not a full subterranean level, it's just at a slope downwards with the driveways. And that helped really bring the garages back so that instead of looking all at a bunch of garages and having it feel more like a townhouse, it's going to be more of that front facing, that we can have those porches, that we can have that front yard landscape, and provide some additional room for people to park on if they need to in the driveway. So that's, kind of a unique piece of this development, but with the grade, I think it really provided that opportunity to incorporate something that was a little bit unusual without creating 3-story units, because we were also trying to incorporate these junior ADUs, which were also very, very difficult to fit, while still having any sort of rear yard and setback and those other aspects that we wanted to preserve. And with that, I don't have anything else, but if you have any questions that come to mind, of course, I'm here to answer those now, or I can answer them afterwards.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation, and we will have the questions to the applicant after our public comments.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. So to the staff, we have a lot of people today at the chamber, so can we have a number count? How many public speakers do we have today?
So through the chair, I have not received any public comment cards, and so if there's anyone that wants to speak on this item, I would invite them to fill out a public comment card in the back and submit it to me. And if there's anyone on Zoom that would like to speak to this item, I would invite you to raise your hand, and I will add you to the queue. There are 2 on Zoom, and so I can start with those and
Or through the chair, we might just give a couple of minutes. It looks like some of the people in the office, or in the chambers today are interested in speaking, so maybe we can just take a couple minutes and allow them to.
Yeah, how about we just take a 5-minute break and then come back? Thank you.
comment and question, if that would be helpful at this
Yeah,
time.
that'd be a great time to get the answer for that. Thank you.
So are we back to order then officially? Yeah?
Okay.
Okay.
All right, to clarify the answer to Board Member Adcock's earlier question about how the applicant is allowed to provide the BMR unit as one is the smaller unit. The requirement that the BMR unit be reflective of the sort of average of the overall units is a local requirement, and they're allowed to request a concession from that requirement, and that's what they've done. They're entitled to one concession, and that's their one. So the city has very limited discretion, as we mentioned before, to deny that request.
Samuel, are we good there?
So through the chair, we have at the moment 11 requests to speak, including one group representing 5. So I did want to ask how much time you wanted to allow the group and the individual commenters.
Okay, so since we have lots of speakers today and we want to use our time efficiently, so I will reduce each of the speakers' time slightly. So for individual speakers, please have your comments for 2.5 minutes. And for the public, for the group speakers, we will allow 12 minutes. Thank you.
And how long was the group, you said?
12.
12 minutes, okay. I don't believe my tech lets me do half-minute increments.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
so sorry about that.
Then can we do 9 and then 3?
9 and 3?
No, I mean, oh, so, no, I
It
mean,
would be-
for the group speakers, can we do?
I can do
timing
12.
twice?
And then
Okay, 12.
it'd be 3 or 2, yeah. You said 2.5, right?
Okay.
On behalf of us, if I may, we're okay with 9 and 3.
Okay, okay, so then 9 for the group and maybe go back to 3 minutes for individuals. To be fair.
Thank you. Okay. Then our first speaker will be Shalu, representing a group of 5. And
Please state and spell your name for the record. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. My name is Shailesh Mehra. That's my formal name. I go by Shalu. My first name is spelled Shailesh. My last name is Mehra. I reside on 875 Mockingbird Lane in the Esther Clerk neighborhood. And these are my neighbors, as are our other neighbors who have joined us on the Zoom call. And we thank you for this opportunity to speak to you because, frankly, we have had regrettably limited communication and limited opportunities to address the concerns that we have regarding the safety issues that this project is creating. Safety issues that are inherent to the project and objectively cannot be rectified by the current design. So just to provide context, our neighborhood, I think, has been around for 50, 60 years. I moved into the neighborhood in 2013. Most of our neighbors, many of our neighbors have been there since the 70s. And as a consequence, many of our neighbors are in their 90s now. I realize that the notice that was provided was, met the basic requirements for, under Palo Alto city regulations. But frankly, it was inadequate for us. And that is because many of our neighbors who wanted to be here have challenges with mobility, have challenges because they, as I said, they're in their 90s, they have doctor's appointments. And even with the 3 days that's allowed for ADA, it simply wasn't feasible for them to arrive here and express their concerns about the safety issues that the project is creating. And so we would ask in part for consideration of those issues when, particularly in future communications. Moreover, the 600-foot notice, the standard really doesn't work in our neighborhood. As you've heard, we have been zoned residential estates. And so the design of the neighborhood is that we have one house, essentially per acre. There were 2 and 3 acre lots that have one house. So 600 feet doesn't reach much of our community. So we ask, we ask the city staff to keep these things in mind when we get future notices on this matter. So to provide context regarding our safety concerns, we have one ingress-egress in the neighborhood. It is at Rostradero and Old Trace. We have, I think 29 residences, right? We have 29 residences in 3 cul-de-sacs. And there is one ingress-egress to those 3 cul-de-sacs. And that was fine under the original design. I won't say it's fine, but at least there was a rationale to it in the original design. What is now being proposed is that there will be 16 homes placed right at the ingress-egress, the sole ingress-egress that we have into our neighborhood, into those 3 cul-de-sacs. So we're increasing the number of homes by 55%, which is one thing, but we're concentrating all of those homes right at the ingress-egress, the sole ingress-egress to our neighborhood. Just from the numbers alone, you can see that this is untenable in terms of the safety hazard it creates. Frankly, we have already faced any number of safety challenges from the traffic that's already on Rostradero, right? If and when this development goes in place with these 16 homesteads, all of which are going to be car dependent because we're nowhere near mass transit in our neighborhood, we're adding 32 vehicles at that ingress-egress. Back in 2020, we were right next to a fire evacuation zone, and we were getting texts to say that we had less than an hour to leave, that we may have to leave on an hour's notice. At the time, my father was still alive, elderly, suffering from dementia, had mobility challenges. We were getting him ready, to evacuate at that time, and our daughter, our pet. If there had been, 16 residences and, frankly, 32 vehicles at the one point of exit for us to leave, it literally would have been impossible for us to evacuate. It is just not possible. And you were placing that's just one incident. We've had instances already in our neighborhood where ambulances have not been able to get to our elderly neighbors in time. We've had at least a couple of such incidents. Imagine what's going to happen when we have 32 vehicles at that ingress-egress. There's no reasonable design around, given where the density is being placed, to that issue. The neighborhood simply wasn't designed for that. So with that, we have the children. We have kids with who are mobility challenged. We already have safety hazards at the crosswalk of Rostradero and Old Trace, which many of us have been asking City Council for years to address, at least with flashing lights, which hasn't been done. Now, in the staff report, there's some lip service paid to putting flashing lights, as a mitigation of traffic. I mean, that's a bare minimum that should have been done years ago for the situation that we're facing now with the traffic on Rostradero. That is it's not possible for that to be a mitigation for the traffic and the density that's being placed right at R1 ingress-egress in the neighborhood. So my understanding is that, we're hoping to have, the bare minimum of hearings that are available, with the CEQA limitation that's being proposed here, the purported limitation of 5 hearings. I don't know if this qualifies as one of them, but we encourage you to hear our voices and our real concerns here because lives are at risk. It's not hyperbole. And we also encourage you to come to our neighborhood, to see for yourself, to actually see how this would play out in practice, because it will be immediately apparent to you. So with that, I'll leave the balance of my time.
All right, thank you for your comments. Next, please.
Our next speaker is Herb B.
Good morning. Board Member Hurst asked the question about pricing, or I guess affordability, and I'm more familiar with the changes in the numbers for affordable housing on the various voucher programs and the ones for the various programs on multifamily housing on different 4% and 9%. And on those, it's come to the point where those standards for what the county is willing to pay on affordable housing are based on zip code now, where the applicant no longer has to make the case that the cost of things in Palo Alto are much more than the county numbers, and therefore they should get the money for that. But on those cases, what the individual tenant is paying is still just a percentage of income. So by doing that, the applicant, the developer, gets much more money. On this particular case, I don't know if the same thing applies, but you're getting the different kinds of projects before you, and you should be aware of how that status changes in the way those numbers are calculated by law. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Marilyn S., followed by Ken Wardy.
Good morning. I'm Marilyn Stocker, Stocker. I live at 880 Mockingbird Lane, which is the first house on Mockingbird Lane after you have made a turn from Old Trace Road. I'm very concerned, as Shalu is, about the congestion at the corner of Arastradero and Old Trace Road. Arastradero used to be a country lane. It's now a significant artery between 280 and Foothill Expressway. And so Old Trace Road, the corner, is fairly close to Foothill Expressway. And so at busy times of day, which are when children are going to school, when people are going to work, we can go through two sequences of the traffic light, 2 3-minute sequences of the traffic light. And so the traffic backs up west of Old Trace Road. And it does impede us from getting out of of Old Trace Road. It's also a 35 mile per hour portion of Arastradero. And so traffic is very quick, it's very speedy. It doesn't stop at Old Trace Road, it continues. We have bicycle lanes on both sides of Arastradero, and now with electric bicycles, the bicycle traffic is extremely rapid. It's very difficult when you're at the corner of Old Trace Road to look left and see a speeding bicycle in that first lane. I'm a walker. I've lived at Mockingbird Lane for 52 years, and for my health, I walk instead of going to a gym. And one of my routes is to cross Arastradero and walk in the VMware place, or on the walking path, not the bike path, but the walking path. It's very difficult to get across Arastradero, and many times of the day, people do not stop. One thing the developer mentioned was that most homes in the neighborhood, that the new homes should blend in with the homes in the existing neighborhood. Most of our homes are one-story homes, sort of a ranch-style home. So they're not a large two-story home. I would like to know what parking has been planned for the ADU people. So we're talking, we know that there are 8 two-car garages, but what about the other people? Where are they going to park?
Thank you. This concludes your time.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Kanwar D, followed by Ellen S.
Good morning. Thank you for your time and the opportunity this morning. I just won't restate the context that Shallow had already provided, so I'll just add to the points already made in the interest of time. Marilyn talked about crossing Arrastradero. We have, so by the way, I'm at 4110 Old Trace Road, and we have a lot of children in the street, ours included, that bike and walk to school, sports practices every day, multiple times a day. And I have personally witnessed this, that kids actually don't even like going up close to Arrastradero. They stay far away, waiting for a time where there's no traffic before crossing. They don't trust the cars going back and forth. That is a huge issue, and again, I think it underscores the point that Shalu made, that it's worth witnessing that in person. I mean, we're like always thinking like, God forbid, something bad could really happen here because frankly, nobody stops. And with the increasing traffic, what happens is you put more guardrails around it, you put more flashers, you put more things. That increases anxiety for drivers. They actually are now even more constrained, and they like to make up time whenever they can. So we've noticed that, really kind of kick back up after the pandemic when traffic came back. So the backup of traffic past Old Trace Road is a routine thing. Turning left into or right into the road, especially left, is always blocked. Fine, you could maybe address that, but that doesn't address the core problem that the throughput remains the same. You can constrain it in spots, it just makes things worse elsewhere. So that is something that's a serious issue. Ambulances, I'd like to add to that point. A lot of the houses have really steep driveways. Ambulances don't go up those. That's why ambulances need to turn in the street sometimes, and that is not very easy. And you throw overflow parking on the street, that becomes impossible. So really, I just kind of wanted to underscore these things for elderly and for children. It's a very, very difficult intersection. And you add 55% more dwellings to something that was never built for, there's no way to engineer around that. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ellen S., followed by Diane L.
Hi, yes, my name's Ellen Shea, and I live at 910 Mockingbird Lane. I'm the PAN representative for Esther Clark Park. One of the first things I've tried to do when I started doing this was to try to get flashing lights at the crosswalk that we keep talking about. And I've been unsuccessful. Someone did come out and do a study with the ropes across Arrastradero and across Old Trace. They said there was enough traffic, but I haven't been able to get an answer of how they determine that. If they do it early in the morning, maybe there aren't that many cars going across Old Trace, but I don't know if they counted the pedestrians. I don't know what time of day they did it, but there's definitely lots of traffic on Arrastradero. Even when my kids were going to high school, which is over 10 years now, they would not cross there. They would usually walk along the grass on the other side, or walk on the road there till they got up to the intersection, which actually some people recommend that they do. So I think flashing lights would help, but I haven't been able to get a yes on that. So she mentioned that, so maybe it's easier for them to get that done. I don't know. Also, our road is extra narrow. I think it's 10 feet or more below the standard, but that's been grandfathered in. But we will have more cars, not just using this intersection, but also there will be, I just know from experience, there'll be more people parking on the street, on our narrow street. People in Santa Clara County have more than 2 cars per household. And by my calculation, at least 40 people could be living on this lot, so. Let's see, I think that was everything. Another factor is the state of mind in the cars when they're driving on that section there. They go from a 25 mile per hour part when they're going towards 280 and it becomes 35 miles an hour. And in my experience, they go even faster than that because they're kind of all pent up from waiting at the light, which when I've timed it, it's up to 5 minutes. If you just miss the light, you wait another 5 minutes. And everybody's in a hurry and they're distracted because they're punching on their phone. And I saw a boy almost get hit in that crosswalk on a bike. I was watching the whole thing. I don't think he did anything wrong, but it was partway across, a car came very fast from Foothill and had to slam on his brakes. I saw, he had a phone in his hand. I relayed that to the city also, the traffic, and they said, well, we can't do anything about distracted driving.
Thank you. That concludes your time.
So, okay, but anyway.
Our next speaker is Diane L., followed by Jasmine D.
Hello. Can you hear me? My name is Diane Leader. I've been living on Old Trace Court, so I'm at the end where there's not really a fire line, but there's a cul-de-sac. And my main concerns are traffic and safety. I've been living there 32 years. And right now we're having a lot of construction. The cul-de-sac that I live on, I've been calling the police quite a bit. The trucks come in, emergency vehicles are unable to turn around. The other morning, the street sweeper couldn't even get in there because all these trucks are there. I have a wheelchair. My daughter is 47 in a wheelchair, so she's short. She's a little bit more visible because she has red hair, but VTA cannot get in there. Sometimes she has to walk all the way up to Old Trace Road, which is dangerous with all the traffic. So my main concern is emergency services. With the increased population density can lead to delayed responses for police, fire, and ambulance. We live kind of in a semi-rural area. We've had a lot of construction recently on the street. There are no sidewalks. They have been parking on both sides of the street. My daughter in the wheelchair almost got hit a couple of times by these big trucks. My other concern is, as I said, the Rosadero, the intersection. We walk a lot. We have two Goldens, and I've almost got hit twice because of the speed limit. There's a stop sign on Old Trace Road. There is nothing on a Rosadero. So maybe they can put a bump or a hump or even a two-way stop sign or something. It's a safety issue. Plus, what's going to happen with the increased density with all of DoorDash deliveries and Amazon, they cannot turn around, so they will come into the cul-de-sac. They come to the end of the street and turn around, and it's been, it's a very potentially dangerous situation. Also, we all have 1 acre lot, one home. The character of the neighborhood is going to change. It should not be a high density. And thank you for making it so beautiful. It is quite attractive. I appreciate the beauty, but that's not the issue. It's the density and the safety and the traffic and what it's going to do. I apologize for being late today. I couldn't get out of my street. It was backed up a Rosadero. The cars speed. They don't slow down. And it is dangerous. With the new traffic light system, with the 5-minute, the traffic is unbelievable. And we live in a neighborhood. We pay taxes. We acre lots. We paid quite a lot, and this is not acceptable to me. But particularly, the VTA said, what am I going to do? I can't even get in here.
Thank you. That concludes your time.
Okay, so maybe parking on one side will be allowed, maybe put in a sidewalk to make it safe, or maybe reduce the number of dwellings to maybe 4. Something like that to make it acceptable to the neighborhood. So,
thank you.
Thank you so much.
Our next speaker is Nina B. Nina B., you may now speak.
Jasmine?
Nina B. on Zoom.
I think that you missed Jasmine. That was just Diane.
Jasmine B. Oh, sorry about that. Jasmine, you may now speak.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. We live on the corner lot, 4110 Old Trace, right at the ingress point. We've already talked about children biking to the school multiple times a day for sports and others. I also want to talk about our parents. We are a neighborhood, and you've listened to all our concerns. My father-in-law is 82, visually impaired from severe glaucoma. He's a high fall risk. He's already had one fall at home. But one thing that really we would like our elders to thrive upon is the ability to walk. And so the only thing that keeps him motivated is take out his cane and slowly march down and go to Old Trace and walk. My biggest concerns is taking these little joys away from the safety hazard that all this traffic and congestion that's going to be put on Old Trace. I feel like as a mother, I worry about my children, and I am in no way exaggerating this. As a mother, when my 11-year-old goes to school in the morning, they literally have to step away, wait till the speeding cars go, and then go. And I've told them, sweetie, there are distracted drivers, they're all speeding, they are anxious, pent up, I don't know what it is on the roads. And there's a lot of character display on the roads as well. But you have to be very safe. So as a mother and as a daughter-in-law and a daughter, I just want to advocate for the safety of our children and the safety of our parents. And I want my elder neighbors, just like for my parents, to thrive, to be able to walk, right? Simple things that give them joy. And I feel like this might be a huge safety hazard, causing a congestion on the street, which already is quite hazardous to begin with, as very eloquently talked about by Shalu, neighbors before me, Ellen, and Diane. Thank you very much.
Now, Nina B., you can now speak. Nina B., are you there? We'll come back to her after. Jeannie C., you may now speak.
Hi, my name is Jeannie Clancy, and I live at 4146 Old Trace Road. Thank you for listening to all of our concerns today. We are obviously very upset about the proposed development and the safety issues that it will create due to the amount of people that it proposes to have walking across the street, driving and parking on our road. What hasn't been mentioned is that we live, even though we don't live in a extreme fire danger area, Esther Clark Park is actively mitigated for fire danger. And Old Trace Road provides the only fire lane to Esther Clark Park. Arrastradero is also the primary emergency evacuation route for our area and for Los Altos Hills. And so adding this kind of density at that intersection, anything that would impede emergency vehicles, which would be more cars parked along the street, more people walking, anything that would impede that and emergency vehicles would causes significant concern. Talking about the parking, in my opinion, the developer is proposing 17 parking spaces for 16 units. My opinion, that is not enough parking. So that's going to force residents to park along Old Trace Road. Old Trace Road, as people have said, is narrower than most of the roads in Palo Alto. I think it's 30 feet curb to curb rather than 60 feet, which is the standard street width. And so since our road doesn't have we have no sidewalk, there's limited lighting. It wasn't meant for parked cars. Recently, we had an ambulance try to get up our driveway and couldn't because of a parked car along the street. And this is very concerning. And I know there was an incident last year with a fire engine truck trying to get up Mockingbird. They were delayed in their 911 call because they had to negotiate cars parked on either side. This is a serious problem, and there should be steps to mitigate these things before we put this kind of development on that corner. This corner, we live in a rural area. This kind of development wasn't meant for this area. And we don't want to put our families, our friends, our neighbors at risk having to deal with this. And so there's got to be a way that we can come together and create a better situation or a development that will not impact our neighborhood as much as it will. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Shoshana L. Shoshana, you may now speak.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. You heard my mother speak, Diane. I'm at 940 Old Trace Court, which is the third cul-de-sac. I've lived there my whole life. As everyone in the neighborhood, I'll reiterate a little bit. Everyone in the neighborhood said this has been a rural area. I grew up with horses that were there. We are very close to Esther Clark Park, which is the nature preserve. On that particular lot, on my entire life, I've seen coyotes that have hunted there. I've seen great blue herons that frequent that lot. It's on the migration path. This is a different side of Palo Alto. We are right next to Los Altos Hills. As everyone has said, there has been backup and foot traffic that has happened. There are other increased safety concerns that I have. Also, you heard my sister is in a wheelchair, unable to get in and out with ambulances and VTA, which is the transportation because of parked cars that are already backed up onto our street. We live across from the research park. People do actually park on our street that work there. They like to park and on our street already. We already have this backup. As my neighbor Jeannie said, the amount of people and cars per person in California, I think many people live in a home. There could be 5, 6 people living in a house and each of them having a car, maybe 2. And where are those cars going to park? Additionally, we have been living in a neighborhood with construction after construction, and this has been such a mental drain on our mental health. The idea of this is a huge loss to our neighborhood character and the identity of this neighborhood. You see that we don't have HOAs, we communicate as a community, this streets, we care about each other, and we're going to lose a lot of our power together. It's going to increase the neighborhood. This is a historic neighborhood with Esther Clark Park and other artists, but the traffic, we've had robberies that have also increased. This will not only increase the amount of people that are living there, but who is walking up and down our street, from people turning around from Amazon to DoorDash to people just curious, more people walking through the neighborhood. This will definitely impact us forever. This is not just the impact of the construction. It's not just the impact of 1 or 2 moments of traffic. This will impact us forever and change the entire character of this part of town that this area is just not equipped for. We don't have sidewalks. We're not equipped for this. And as others have said, this is one of the busiest intersections, and we just don't have this. My other concerns include the height. As others have said, we have low areas, even the artwork, that people will come and look at this artwork and want to come and turn around and provide garbage and trash and harm the environment that we care so much about in this part of town.
Thank you. Looks like Nina B is lowered her hand, but I did want to offer her a chance because she had originally raised her hand. Nina B, if you'd still like to speak, you may do so. And then through the chair, I did want to let you know that it looks like when we had public comment, someone else raised their hand other than who was listed. I wanted to ask if you wanted to allow them or not.
Do we have one more?
Yeah, one more.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, then Adrian, you may now speak.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, my name is Adrian Ridner. I live at 4155 Old Trace Court, and we've been there for the better part of 12 years now, so appreciate your time for letting me speak today. Apologies, my remarks that are a little bit overlapping with what you heard from all my neighbors, but it's critically important, in particular around the health and safety that this project represents to the overall area and the neighborhood. As you heard already, traffic conditions on Arrestorado Road are already difficult, often unsafe. I have 7-year-old twins. They're terrified of the cars there. They've almost been hit multiple times. Vehicles frequently travel at high speeds and do not reliably stop. Turning from Old Trace Road onto Arrestorado and the other way around, especially the left turn, is often requires very long periods during peak hours. So I'm really curious if this traffic study was done and what it included, because visibility at that corner is very limited, making it difficult to see oncoming vehicles when pulling in and out. And I'm concerned the location and the size of this project would significantly hamper that from a safety perspective, both to vehicles and pedestrians. The number of daily vehicle trips. I'm also curious if there was a traffic study, because with the number of units and the number of vehicles added, I believe is going to increase dramatically, and the current conditions on the area do not safely support that. It was already mentioned that vehicles that are delivery vehicles have to go all the way around to turn because of the size of the street. But also I'm particularly concerned about the turning radius for emergency vehicles around fire, earthquakes. And I think these projects do not properly account for access points that remain fully adequate for fire trucks, emergency response vehicle, and the evacuation capacity of the whole neighborhood can be compromised, in addition to the people in the subdivision, which is a particular concern to me. I'm all for offering additional housing. I'm all for offering low income. My brother is disabled and lives in low income. I would love to provide additional areas for him to live. But this I would not consider safe if he had an incident, for traffic and ambulance to be able to access and turn around multiple times inside the subdivision, let alone in the larger Old Trace Road or with the potential additional traffic in Arrestorado. I would not feel safe doing that. Plus, he'll be nowhere near transit or any other amenities where some of the other projects that are being considered by the city could be. So again, overall, I'm in favor of adding housing, but this, I believe, needs further story. In addition, the hillside location, I think there's other risks around the surrounding properties. And lastly, the water and geological areas were near the creek, and I'm curious what studies were done around that. Anyway, appreciate your time, and I hope you take our safety concerns seriously.
Thank you, and through the chair, that concludes public comment.
Okay, thank you all for your comments. So we will move on to the applicant rebuttal. You have 10 minutes if you want to speak anything.
Thank you for your comments. I really do appreciate them. I'm also a mother. I have small children. And last year, one of my children was hit by a car in the street. And fortunately, he's a child and bounced back. But, I really appreciate safety concerns. And that's something I take very seriously as well. With the comments that we've received from the city planning department, transportation, we've voluntarily adopted any of the safety recommendations that they have suggested. I am very much open to any safety concerns or suggestions if there is further study as to signal improvements. That's something that we are willing to consider and to incorporate if they are warranted. That all said, I think that sometimes with development, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear about what the traffic impacts are going to be. There's a lot of fear about what that is going to do to the neighborhood. And in looking at this development before we submitted the project, we did have vehicle miles traveled analyzed. We did have the trips that it would generate in the mornings and in the evenings analyzed. And it is actually really, really minimal. It is not the traffic safety. And you can shake your head, but there is specific data. Traffic engineers do this, and we're happy to have those numbers validated by the city traffic engineers and to incorporate those recommendations. But according to Hexagon Transportation Consultants, which is a consultant that I believe the city uses for its own work, the project would generate 5 trips at peak hours, which is approximately 1 car every 12 minutes in the AM. And in the evening, sorry, that's in the PM, and in the AM it would be 4 trips out, 1 trip in. So, this is not something that is likely to increase traffic substantially. And this is a project that is located on the corner of Arastradero and Old Trace that is not expected to generate traffic into the neighborhood. If there is striping, no parking signs, that sort of thing, happy to incorporate that. We don't want to have impacts on the neighborhood, and certainly during construction, we would be following all required rules, staging on site, parking on the site as well. In terms of the width of Old Trace Road, that was raised several times. The right-of-way for Old Trace Road is 40 feet across, which is more than adequate for fire and egress. That is well over the minimum, and it also actually is well over the minimum even if you had parking on either side of that street. We do have, as mentioned, we are integrating voluntary safety improvements, some of these signal issues that were discussed that will in fact make the crossing more safe. And but again, I'm happy to work with the transportation department and to look at things that we might be able to add to improve the safety of this development. And with that, I don't think I've got anything further to add, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. And now it's time for the board to ask questions to the applicant. Who want to start?
Well, I'd like to come back, since the issue is so much traffic issue, seems to me that what I didn't hear you mention is it possible to make the entry-exit a one-way street so that you don't have cars coming back into Old Trace?
I believe we're planning to block the right turn into the subdivision from Arastradero, but no, there's a pork chop sort of median. So the private drive does need to have access, if you're going to be coming from the city, of being able to turn left onto Old Trace Road in order to go through the subdivision. So without
You're not
changing
answering my question, though.
Oh.
The question is, why couldn't your own private road be one way?
Because then you wouldn't be able to have, you don't have access because of the meridian. So it wouldn't allow for a car to be able to go left on Arastradero.
You're talking about the division that's in the middle of Astrodero, right?
Yeah, so there is a median at Arastradero, so that's going to prevent anybody from going
Out
left.
and turning left.
Pardon?
That's going to prevent people from going out and turning
Correct.
left. Is
So
that
they
what you're
wanted
saying?
to access the freeway, they would have to go right and then do a U-turn or, to be able to go left to be able to access the freeway. And, if that meridian wasn't there, potentially you could just have a one-way, but then you also have a then unprotected turn, which is not as safe.
If I may, packet page 16 and the analysis that staff prepared for that multimodal access does provide some reasoning as to the questioning that Board Member Hirsch is asking right now regarding the reasoning why what's being proposed for that through access of the site is as planned.
Where's the packet page? Oh, the packet page.
Packet page 16 of the staff report.
David, do you mind if I jump in here with some related questions? Is that all right? David?
No, I don't mind. Yeah, go ahead.
And what's the width of the Rose Drive?
20 feet.
20 feet wide. And what's the turning radius at that corner?
The turning radius, it's per standard, per city code.
And then is the intention, some background, I live in this neighborhood, I've lived in there my whole life, I'm very familiar with this lot and this entrance and egress at all times of day. So on that note, so if you're coming from 280 towards this development, your easiest path of access is actually coming from Arastradero, turning right into the units, correct?
Correct.
And then if you're leaving from this, your easiest path of travel is coming, and you're going towards Palo Alto proper or Menlo Park or Los Altos, your easiest access is, again, coming out and onto Arastradero.
Yes.
Now, if you're trying to get to 280, everything's going to come off of that old Trace Road because it has to, right? So that's why you can't have a single direction on Rose Drive. Is that accurate?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any sidewalk along Old Trace Road? I see you proposing along Rastradero, although there is no other sidewalk to connect to.
Correct. So we are looking at incorporating a sidewalk, but there is a heritage tree that would be right in the path of the sidewalk. And so I think on balance, we'd prefer to preserve the tree, especially because that sidewalk doesn't connect to anything. But I mean, it's a balancing act.
Okay. Back to you, David. Thank you.
And if
the traffic department really should be very much involved here. It seems to be a very, very significant issue for the entire community. Have they absolutely studied this issue?
Yes.
I can't, its impact is going to be severe on you as well, because clearly the amount of traffic, the amount of cars, the fact that you have large houses here and that they're going to have children who may be driving, it's a major issue. So would you be looking at this more?
We've engaged a traffic consultant who is providing their opinion, and we value their opinion, and we're looking to what the data shows us and to what the comments that we get back from the city.
If I may quickly jump in, back to packet page 16 under multimodal access, the transportation department had provided comments on why the driveway or the private road was designed the way it is. They did take into consideration trash pickup as well as on-site circulation for emergency vehicles. And on sheet C.1.6, there's also a diagram that shows the turning radius diagram for the emergency vehicle access that connects back to the access and the alternatives that they considered and why they went ahead with this design. If, without the through access, trash service would need to be staged along Old Trace, and we wanted to avoid that from happening. So that's why they proposed the way it is right now.
Clearly, if there's a median, and I don't want to talk like a traffic engineer, but since it's such an issue, I think it falls on us. We're answering this issue ourselves here. Puts us kind of in the middle of the major concern of everybody in the community. I just don't understand the reasoning why, since actually the driveway, the drive out has a left turn, looks like a left turn radius for the street in the direction of 280, turning left onto.
Can we bring up the site plan on the screen?
Yeah, good idea.
Bear with us while we do that.
And while we do work on pulling up that image to support this discussion, I also want to share that we have alerted the Office of Transportation to these comments and concerns. There have been past discussions on what can be done to ensure safety in this area. And so these also have been shared with them in terms of the larger responsibilities and expectations for roadway improvements or adjustments that might be needed in this area. In terms, given that a lot of this is existing condition, that this project is not going to be able to improve. And so here we go. We've got the site plan now, and so then we can refocus on this project in particular and understanding its context.
Okay. Not sure where you were going there, but.
Just wanted you to know that for the larger issues and concerns, that is something that the city has passed on to the Office of Transportation to be aware of in terms of the neighbors' concerns.
Okay, so I mean, I see this as still not an unreasonable idea that you would change the island in some way and to create a possibility of the traffic going in both directions once they get to that intersection. It may be a bit dangerous. I felt it was a bit dangerous myself because it's so close to the major corner there. But nonetheless, with a combination of things that I can imagine in my uneducated transportation experience, it seems like a reasonable way to deal with the issue of the over stress on old, on the main street here, and to keep the traffic away from going back onto that street for sure if this project goes ahead.
Okay, and so great. I think that's a great suggestion. It's something that we can look into further as to whether it is feasible. We've had some level of review of these topics, but as stated in the staff report, there are still some technical issues that we will continue to work with the applicant on.
Okay. I would recommend that you get some community representative on your discussions from here on out, because I think it's very serious from their point of view.
David, I think we can leave our comments and recommendations later, but if you have any other questions?
Can I actually ask David a clarification question? What are you suggesting that off of Rose Drive or Rose Road, that you think it'd be safer for people to be able to turn left? All right, we can discuss that later, but yeah, that seems odd.
Do we have any other questions at this moment to the applicant or the staff?
I have a few. Sure, go ahead. All right. So part of what I was hearing you say earlier is that you were looking into, at some point, having 6 units on this property. And that because of the CEQA exemption that you guys are vying for, that you had to have a minimum of the 8 units. So is that accurate?
It's actually 16, yes.
So it is the 16, which is hence
Yes.
why the junior use.
Yeah.
That was my follow-up question. Perfect. Okay, so because of that, you're sort of wrangling these junior ADUs into there to hit the
Exactly.
CEQA exemption.
Yeah.
But in theory, you'd be amenable to having reduced number of units.
Probably not at this point.
At this point, okay,
yes.
but in the original stages.
At the very beginning, potentially, but, it is a significant factor not having a CEQA question hanging over the project.
Understood. Can you talk to me a little bit about the modern versions? You've got 3 of these units, 1, 3, and 5A, 5B, and they're sort of a modern aesthetic. And I do want to, so we're transitioning from the site planning and layout, which we will circle back to, I promise. But I just sort of want to dive into this a little bit. These modern units are, the other 2, I would argue, are relatively complementary. They have appropriate daylight planes for, being next to each other. But you've sort of chosen the 3 corner units that are next to neighbors, that are next to streets, to be the blockiest and bulkiest. with the least amount of slope and roof, like have no slope, in fact. What was the design decision for making those specific edge units be sort of the bulkiest?
Well, actually, I think it's in part to keep these the shortest. So the Spanish-style home has a flatter roof pitch, and then the moderns also have they just have the parapet and a flat roof. So that allows them to be at the lowest height, based on the natural grade. So I think that was the thinking there versus had we taken the home that is on lot 7, that would have, I think, been a much taller house when you look at the way that the road slopes up.
Understood. On that note, with these parapet walls, is there any design that the people will be allowed to walk on the roofs?
No.
Okay. So what I am noticing in the elevations is it looks like these parapets from sort of roof structure to top of parapet is over 5 feet tall. Is there a reason that it's that high?
I don't think so. That's not something I picked up on. I can add, I think Taylor is on the call still, so she could probably speak to that. I'm not sure if they were trying to, account for potential equipment being on the roof, depending on, whether HVAC or whatnot can fit on site. But yeah, that does seem actually quite tall and not needed.
Right. And again, just noting that these are the units sort of at the corners, right? These are supposed to be the softest sort of areas. And so having those be a little bit blocky, I would argue is maybe just needs to be softened and revisited. And maybe it's a low slope roof or something like that. But I would just punt that to the architect and say that that would be well worth another examination, making sure that these corners are as soft as possible and maybe a little bit less visually intrusive in that regard. And I'm trying to find the page where I had that noted, that the height limits. Very nitpicky question. Oh, there we go. They're there. Okay. And it's specifically on A5.3, that's lot number 3. You can see that, for example, on drawing B1, lot 3 roof bearing and lot 3 top of parapet is 5 foot 11 inches. So again, that's sheet number A5.3. And
if I could speak to that, we can definitely decrease that parapet height. We are just doing that in order to create some more change in elevation or change in the roof lines for those designs. So, but we can definitely lower those.
Yeah, and on lot 1 as well, I just think that those are a little 6 feet tall for a parapet. Feels like more than is necessary, especially if you're trying to maintain, scale, appropriate scale for this neighborhood, which is predominantly ranch houses. Very minor question, the sign, like when you're looking at the cover sheet, the sign on Arrastradero seems to be facing the wrong direction. And what I mean by that is that when you're entering that particular street, you're only ever going to be coming from the 280 side of things. And that sort of looks like it's facing out the opposite way. So I might reconsider that placement. I know these are minor comments. Also, in terms of the heritage tree, and this might go to the city for their commentary, the biggest concern here that we seem to be hearing on repeat from the neighbors is safety. And the applicant is proposing a sidewalk, that one's fine, yes, stay right there, is proposing a sidewalk on, I'm gonna switch this over to pink, along Arrastradero, when really it's the opposite side of the road, has that pedestrian pathway, and there's really nothing. There's no connection to sidewalk anywhere else. So we're gonna have this short run of sidewalk that I think is valuable and I think is well worth it and will make that area that much safer. That being said, I also hear the concept that going down Old Trace Road would need a little bit of attention there as well. So my argument would be if there's a heritage tree in this location, is that something the city would be amenable to sort of allowing to be removed in place of a sidewalk for safety issues? And again, I'm not trying to put you on the spot here, just is that a conversation that could be had?
Yeah. The Urban Forestry Department would need to be involved on that decision, so I will defer that decision to them, but we will continue that conversation with them.
Okay, great, thank you. I had a few other questions to the applicant. The neighbors here, raise very valid concerns about this intersection. Now, while that's sort of something you're inheriting, right, you didn't cause the traffic issues at this site. I drive this road pretty much every day. I know exactly how backed up it gets at 4 p.m. I know exactly how unsafe it is. I'm very, very, very familiar with this. I had friends that live on Old Trace Road. That being said, so when you're looking at that intersection, I don't know how to phrase this properly. Are you opposed in any way to any of the suggestions that the neighbors have brought up? Flashing lights, stop sign, even a stop light. And I know that that's something that would, again, ultimately be in coordination with the city. Is that something that you as a developer have any issue with or would have any pushback for, or would you actually be encouraging of that to make that intersection, specifically at Old Trace and Arrastradero, a bit more safe for everyone involved?
Before the applicant jumps in, I just want to bring one thing to attention.
Yeah.
As a part of the first round of review, transportation had commented on the significant, pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicular interaction they would have at that intersection. There is an existing crosswalk at that corner going across Arrastradero to the north side, but they are proposing to add a rapid flashing beacon, which will be activated upon, pressing the button. One of the recommendations I think the public had also provided. So that has been taken into consideration and is proposed along that crosswalk that's already existing.
Okay, so I'm going to stay with you for a minute. Has there been any discussion of adding a stop sign or even a stop light there?
Don't believe so.
Okay, and has anyone sort of requested that, anything along those lines? And then again, also additionally, there's the crosswalks are sort of at the one side of Old Trace Road, but not at the opposite side. Any reason why that wouldn't be expanded, or it's just not come up in conversation yet?
It had come up in conversation to add a sidewalk along Old Trace Road as well, but I think something that the applicant had also brought up was, going back to the traffic safety issue. We wanted to make sure that we provide circulation in that area. The other thing that we did take into consideration was adding the sidewalk along Old Trace and then connecting it to existing infrastructure. But as I mentioned before, there was no existing sidewalk infrastructure on Old Trace. So that would be part of like a larger kind of infrastructure improvement.
Yeah, I think the point that I'm trying to get at is that this intersection here really, with increased traffic, right, and it already seems to be a problem. Right, so it's one of those where if we're talking about traffic being an issue, it's more than just flashing lights and pedestrian walkways. It may need to be something as extensive as a stop light or a stop sign at the bare minimum. So I would just say that that conversation absolutely needs to continue with the city, the applicant, and the neighbors, because that's, putting in flashing lights is going to, help pedestrians get across a little bit faster. But as one of the neighbors had mentioned, sometimes that can actually cause more stress, right? I mean, you go up and down El Camino, on the south side, you've got these pedestrian lights and all of a sudden people they turn to red, and then you've got a 37-second watching that one person cross 6 lanes of El Camino, and people just blow right through those stoplights all the time. And so it's one of those where I'm not necessarily sure that's going to be enough. So I would really just say that conversation needs to continue. Apologies, I don't mean to get into comments. I'm trying to stick to questions here, so sorry before Chair Chen gets angry with me. Okay, so sidewalks addressed that. And then you had mentioned that the traffic pickup, trash pickup. Can you please talk me through what the plan is for trash staging and on trash days and collection, things like that?
So I think trash staging is all on site, so it's just a typical single-family collection. So the trash cans need to be, I think, within the garages, and there's locations for the cans to be stored there, and then they would be wheeled onto the street by the individual residents the same way as any other single-family trash pickup.
And so with the 20-foot wide road, there would be also additionally trash cans in the roadway on that morning pickup?
That's correct.
Okay, and that would probably be both sides of the road to be double loaded on Rose Drive?
Correct.
Okay. And last item I wanted to discuss was these subterranean garages, which you knew I was going to ask about. So those are typically not permitted in Palo Alto. We have seen those sort of have problems with flooding and things like that in the past, and also with the, during construction, the water mitigation requirements by the city of Palo Alto are pretty intense. How do you propose to make sure that those are all sort of working functionally during construction as well as the life of the garages.
Do you mean working during construction in what way?
Drainage, right? So when you're digging basements in Palo Alto, you can't pump the water out, right? So if anything happens, are you guys going to be trying to start construction at a certain time of year? Are you going to be just sort of waiting for the right timing? And then once these garages and driveways are in, are you going to have significant drainage systems at the bottom of the driveways? How are you going to make sure that these things don't flood?
Yes,
Things like that.
yes. So all of the above, and that's what, I do have Brian Ballerini on the call. He's our civil engineer. And I mean, especially with the slope of the driveway, that is a real concern, is making sure that this basement is not going to be a repository for water, because water is, as we all know, is one of the most damaging things to a structure. So that's something 100% that we want to make sure is properly accounted for especially during the longevity of the project, but during construction, I'm going to just look to our civil engineers as a significant question that we need to answer.
Okay. Yeah, and I would we've got, when projects are built in Palo Alto, we basically have to build it like a boat. And the driveway down into the basement seems like a pretty big ingress for potential water. And then so just making sure that that is covered with how you're going to divert that, make sure it doesn't go into neighbors' properties. So not as much of a question, but sort of just making sure that that's flagged and noted.
No, I appreciate that. That is a concern. It's not a fully subterranean basement. It is partially subterranean because of the grade, but still.
Slope is slope.
Yeah, slope is slope. Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Water runs downhill.
With that, I'll hold the rest of my questions and comments for later. Thank you guys very much.
If I may go next with some questions. Thank you for your presentation. So I'm going to go back to my earlier question about, the 8 units total plus, times 2 for junior ADUs. But did you, and I know it's like, market value and all those kind of things, why the 5B, I think is the 5B or 5B, I forget, the 100% area median income unit, but the rest of the houses are huge. Did you consider, or can you explain why the 100% AMI unit could not be slightly more generous?
It could be, but it all comes down to the economics of it. So building costs are expensive, land is expensive, development impact fees are expensive, and at the end of the day, we have to design a project that we think we can build, and that means that we have to provide returns to our investors. And we are providing the BMR unit that is going to come at a significant cost to the project. And so it is an economics question.
Okay, and then related to that, and it sounds like the reason for providing all these junior ADUs are to get your 16-unit count. But majority of those junior ADUs are such tortured plans. I know you mentioned earlier that, you're thinking about multi-generational families. And in I forget, 3,000-4,000 square foot house, you have this tiny tortured junior ADU for the grandparents to live. That just does not seem like that is your intent. So can you explain why these junior ADUs are so tortured?
Well, I don't know that I would call them tortured, but I appreciate your concerns there. I mean, junior ADUs have very specific requirements. Essentially, they're an extra bedroom with an ensuite. And as somebody, I also have my parents coming from out of country, and they come and they want to stay in an ADU. They want some privacy. My mom is always in my kitchen. She doesn't really need an extra kitchen, but we do have to have some element of cooking facilities for it to count as an ADU or a junior ADU. We didn't want to go the route of a full ADU because the site is very constrained. And so it was a bit of a, fitting it into where we could. If we didn't have to do cooking facilities in the junior ADU in order for it to count as an ADU, we wouldn't have done that. It really is to provide that extra bedroom and ensuite for family members or guests, or whether it's a a college student that's coming home that wants something that's a little bit more private.
And through the chair, if I could jump in, JADUs are regulated in a really specific way by state law. The city is extremely constrained in what it can require in terms of the design of the JADU.
But there's no upper limit on what you can design, right? There's a minimum requirement.
If I can quickly jump in, JADUs have a minimum of 150 square feet and a maximum of 500 square feet. So there is an upper limit to the square footage of the
These
JADU.
are not 500 square foot JADUs, obviously.
To clarify, the design of the JADUs is not subject to ARB's review. They go through a separate ministerial process after the main units are acted on.
Understood. However, I'm thinking about not as a JADU, and I don't know the rules and requirements of JADUs, and I'm not trying to comment on that. The plan layout of, especially the ones that the JADUs are in the basement, whether you call it JADU or extra bedroom, it's right next to another flex space. It's with a base below grade window. It just does not seem like a pleasant place to be when you are using that as your the second 8 units to get your CEQA exemption. So I just am questioning the design of it when it's giving you so much leeway. So that's just my question, not comment.
May I ask a question about that in response to that for the basements?
Is that allowed? I don't know. Can they?
I would recommend you phrase it as a response to her comments, questions.
May I make a response then?
Sure.
Okay. I would, if you have any specific suggestions about the ADU, junior ADU design for the basement, I would very much appreciate hearing them. That was going to be the question/response.
Thank you. I think Kendra already asked this question, but the driveway, the sloped driveways, do you know what the slope is on those driveways? Because one of the units, like especially the 2 small units, and I think Nishita mentioned this as well, is trying to get a second parking space on the driveway for these smaller units. What is the slope, and is that even feasible to park on those driveways?
I believe it is under 5%, if not 4%.
For like lot 1 and 2, for instance?
Correct.
Maybe your architect or civil engineer can respond to that. It does not look like a 5% slope driveway in any of your drawings.
And to clarify, it's just lots 1, 2, and 3 that have that semi-subterranean driveway, correct?
Yes.
And guardrails will be acknowledged as well.
Like for instance, the image, sorry, if you go back one, yeah, like for that unit, for instance, I couldn't see slopes on the site plans, but these do seem like pretty steep driveways. That would be, kind of feels like more like a parking garage driveway. That would be tough to park on the driveway itself. So I'm just questioning what the slope actually is.
They're all within regulation, but I believe that they're under 5%.
And within regulation for driving or regulation for parking? Because those are a little
Regulation for a
different.
driveway.
Okay. No further questions at this time. Thank you.
Just, I want to add to what you've been talking about here a little bit. Guest parking. Where do guests park? This is a population, and I mean, it's people who have rather large-sized 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom houses, you know. Where are the guests to park for these? What if they have a party here? Clearly, the main street isn't, Chase Street isn't going to be, isn't adequate for parking on. And it's near an intersection that's important to the neighborhood. So where will the guests park?
There's driveways for parking, and there is parking on Old Trace Road. I mean, that is where people do park. It is 40 feet across, which is adequate for double-loaded parking.
You've already spoken. I'm going to continue on this, however, because I don't think that the neighbors think that it's, that
I think,
Old Trace Road is adequate for parking.
yeah, and I think we heard different numbers about the Old Trace street width. So could staff clarify? I think we heard 30 feet and versus 40 feet.
Sure. I'm looking at the plans. Give me one moment, please. On sheet C 2.1, there are sections of the street, and the Old Trace section is noted at 30 feet width.
Is that curb to curb or?
Yes, correct, curb to curb.
And my apologies, I saw 40 feet as the right-of-way.
And there's no sidewalk. There's no sidewalk, right?
Currently, there's no sidewalk.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it's not adequate for parking. Certainly if there's a big party in this, anybody have a big party in this neighborhood, there's no place to park unless you've got something different from the cover sheet or the Are there laybys in the street? Is there space within your private street to provide parking?
There's not space for parking with a 20-foot width. Guests would need to park on the driveways.
Maybe you have a restriction about no parties. It seems that it's inadequate in general for that issue, but I'll come back to that later.
Yeah, I also have a follow-up question on the driveways to lot 1, 2, 3. So is it because of the restriction of the slope and you need to also go certain depths to the basement? That's why these driveways are longer, much longer than normal?
Yes, I mean, part of it is the shape of the lot for lot 3. It's a bit, what we were trying to do was actually stay away from, there's a lot of trees on that back corner lot. And so there's a pretty significant tree canopy. So we tried to pull the house away from that tree canopy. And then it is placing the garage at the very back, which allows for less slope on the driveway as well. So you've got more room to, go a certain distance. Mm-hmm. So that helped. It also helped with some parking. And then, yeah, that was basically the rationale there.
Okay. And if slope allowed, will you consider like shorter driveway in this case? Which means you can pull your house back a little bit further away from the neighbors and then allow larger backyard for lot 1 and 2 and maybe also 3 as well?
Yeah, we have, it's just a 10-foot to the curb right now, so it's pretty tight at the front. I mean, that was my instruction, was to try and pull the houses as far forward as they could. We do have, I believe, some stormwater treatment in those front areas as well.
Just this portion of the building, now the entire building pull back. But I understand that the floor plan might need to be some reconfiguration, but it seems like it's doable.
Yeah, I'm not sure that it is, because it is something that I did want them to do. It was we went back and forth about trying to give as much backyard as possible, because it's something, especially with kids, I appreciate having backyards, and then also wanting to give that buffer with the neighbors as well. But we can certainly look into it, and I can ask them to revisit that question, along with the guest parking. I mean, that's a fair point, and if there is room in this to add a guest parking spot, one of the things that we are doing in the next submission is flipping and doing a reverse plan for Lot 4, just to make the driveway a lot less awkward, but perhaps that might provide a spot for a guest parking spot.
And if I may, it looks like on Zoom, the engineer has their hand raised for the project, so I just wanted to make note of that.
Okay, thank you. And could you,
I wanted to speak to some of the questions from the civil engineering standpoint. One was brought up about the drainage of the driveways. Those driveways will gravity flow out to the storm drain, and then they'll have a pump backup. So that's how the drainage is being handled. It won't rely on pumps solely. It drains out. There's a question about the slope of the driveways. Slope of driveway 1 is just under 7%, which I believe is code for being able to park and maneuver in a residential setting. 2 and 3 are both 2 and 3%, so they're much flatter. I wanted to just talk about the 40-foot street and the guest parking. Typically, 40-foot is not a narrow street. There's room for 2 12-foot travel lanes and an 8-foot parking lane on each side. There is adequate space for parking on Old Trace. Maybe not preferred, but definitely adequate. And then, as Melanie mentioned, there's guest parking in the driveways. People pull in and park in the driveway. I think that was all the questions from a civil perspective.
okay, thank you. And I understand there are publics want to speak. However, we already closed that session, so you may always email to the city staff.
Maybe one more thing on the Old Trace Road. With the 40-foot right-of-way, that size of street isn't normally conducive to sidewalks. It is possible to put a sidewalk there on Old Trace for sure. There's no connectivity in the neighborhood, but when you have a roadway, that sidewalk would only be 5.5 feet wide. It creates some challenges. Normally, if we're putting sidewalk on streets, we'd want to have a planter and a sidewalk in a typical situation, like a rastradero. So are some challenges with sidewalks, but it's definitely doable.
If I may ask a question related to sidewalk as well, like I think this, sorry if I can find so this is the tree right on the screen that you're trying to save, right? This one here, is that correct? Is that the heritage tree that you were talking about?
Yes.
Sorry, let me switch to red, it might be easier. Yeah, there we go. You have this planting edge here, and I think your civil engineer is kind of alluding to the same thing. It's just planting strip, and if you incorporated a sidewalk within your lot, it would take a strip out of your this lot 7 and 1's side yard. However, you're also, the guest parking, sorry, I drew my cars way too big, but that would be that's kind of what you're suggesting, correct, is where the guests might park along Old Trace Road. If, say, this house or whichever house has a party, there's only one parking space along the driveway, 1 or 2. And so any overflow parking would be right on Old Trace. So did you consider, even if it's just within your 1 acre lot from there to there, to include sidewalk within your lot? I don't know if city allows that to be part of a lot, but it seems like that's what you're doing over here. That would allow the neighbors, the kids, to be able to walk to this intersection, make the crossing, what have you, or go to Gunn High School that way, while there might be cars parked on Old Trace, especially in that front, because already we heard all the concerns about, parking and congestion on this area, and if there's parking along Old Trace right at that intersection, then the kids are walking in the middle of the street, right? Because there's no sidewalk on that edge. So did you consider at least incorporating, sidewalk on both the major streets?
We have got that comment, and we're just having some discussions with the city about it. I don't think that necessarily totally opposed to it, although it does not connect to anything on Old Trace. And another thing to keep in mind in terms of parking, I think that there could be parking on the opposite side, like if you're going up Old Trace, but not as getting closer to the intersection because you're just too close to the actual intersection there. So that would create a true safety issue because you're in the visibility triangle. Right. So, I think we can continue to explore. Maybe there is not a true sidewalk, but a gravel path or something that goes around that tree. Mm-hmm. I would prefer not to take the tree out unless there really is a true value that we're providing, and I really am not sure that we are providing that value there, but I'm happy to keep on working with the city on that.
Yeah, because even if there's one car parked along here or two for neighbors' kids coming down when, it's right by the fence and then the next thing is parked cars, then they are walking out to the middle of the road. Right. So even if it's not right at the intersections, even like it's past your Rose Drive, it's still blocking neighbors from walking to the sidewalk. So I know we're in question period, but it does feel like it could add a level of safety that would be valuable to the neighborhood.
Yeah, good point.
And if I may quickly jump in here, in my conversations with the Transportation Department during the second round of review, we did bring up minimum street frontages and how much you would need to have on Old Trace Road in order for the applicant to accommodate parking on one side. And I believe it would be 36 feet of like actual street frontage, and then including the curbs and gutters, it would be like 46 feet. That's what would be necessary. So if we do discuss that alternative, we would need to take that into consideration as well to make sure this minimum street frontage is met. I meant street width, my apologies.
And I have a couple more questions. Could you please zoom out a little bit for the site plan? So for privacy issues, actually, based on what I see from the satellite plan, it seems like the adjacent house is somewhere here. And there is only two existing trees that is actually far away behind, which leave the big openings just in front of the adjacent house. So do you plan on planting more privacy trees to increase the privacy?
I think so. Yes, that's certainly been something that I would like us to do. I have to look at the specific plans there. I thought that there actually were more trees. If we go to, I think, C12, there's some trees. Oh, no, sorry, I'm looking in the wrong spot. Yeah, C12, there's some trees kind of close to Old Trace Road along that edge. But I will definitely talk to our landscape architect.
You can see the big opening here.
Yeah, we have a pine tree on the neighbor's yard. It looks like there's quite a bit of canopy already. L1 is where we show a lot of that canopy. But if it's possible to do additional trees there, absolutely.
And also on the elevations, it seems like all these windows facing the adjacent neighbors, no matter if it's bedroom or walk-in closet or bathrooms, they are all floor-to-ceiling windows. So would you consider to raise the window sill height for the bathroom and the walk-in closet?
Yes, we can definitely do that.
Yeah, like those two windows here. They're facing the neighbors, and it's not necessary to have this low sill. And also a question to the staff. So I understand that for RE zone, the minimum lot size is 1 acre, but in general, for citywide, is there like minimum lot size requirement for a single family?
The minimum lot size is dependent on the zone district. So the residential estate minimum is the 1 acre. And if it's a different zone district within the low density residential, for example, for an R1 district, it would be 6,000 square feet.
Okay. And this one, the minimum one is less than 1,600 for the lot size, and it's still acceptable to the city.
So as a part of the state density bonus waivers, the applicant has requested a waiver for the minimum lot size to be reduced to 1,600 and varies for each lot that they've proposed.
Okay, thank you. And do we have any other questions?
So one of my questions is, I noticed that room heights are quite high. So in some homes, the first floor rooms are 12 feet high, and the second floor rooms are 10 feet high. So this contributes to the homes being very, very tall. Reducing those would not reduce your density, but definitely would make the homes more compliant with the code. Have you thought about it?
You know, I hadn't really thought about that, but I'll go back and talk to our architect. I mean, I typically think 10 feet is it feels very expansive, and that's something that we can look at reducing.
Yeah, standard in Palo Alto is 8 feet. So you could easily reduce the height of the homes by potentially 6 feet. And that would make the homes more in line with the neighborhood.
I think our market studies and what buyers typically want to see now is at least a 9-foot ceiling height. So I think we would be willing to reduce the height, instead of having a 12, certainly to a 10 on the first floor, and then looking at maybe taking the plate height down on the second floor and using some vaulted ceilings to create that feeling of height. Probably an 8-foot is not something we would pursue because I don't think that's in line with a saleable new home product at this point. But certainly we can take down the height, and it looks like there's at least 2 to 3 feet that we can bring it down, if not more.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a question to the staff. I think the rules about the density bonus are not meant to, create, high returns, but they are meant to create more housing. So, I think, if you're asking for reducing the daylight plane requirement in order to get more density, I think that's cool. But if you are asking to reduce the daylight plane to have a property that is more marketable than what you think you want to have, I'm not sure whether that's part of the rules.
I can clarify. There's pretty clear case law that says we're not allowed to ask the applicant to sort of redesign in a way that would preserve the proposed density but would reduce amenities, including perhaps ceiling height. So state law is actually more prescriptive than it seems on its face.
Another question is about the signage. So you have these 2 signs on the corners that says the Oak.
Well, we proposed this in this latest round that you're seeing, but there's been an issue raised about whether it's in the visibility triangle where we can actually place it. So we are working with the city about potentially taking it over to the fencing, maybe incorporating in the public art realm. So right now we want to create some signage, something that is that demarcates the residential subdivision. On the other hand, I think what we've proposed there is not maybe not working right now. But if you have any comments, I'm happy to also to hear them too.
Well, right now, I'm just asking questions, comments come later. And then I also noticed that you are placing the AC, outdoor AC units in the side yards. Can you tell more about that?
Versus like on the roof, is that what?
Versus within the buildable area and further away from the neighbors to mitigate noise impact.
I think maybe this is something that's outside of my technical realm, but I thought that we have to have the HVAC condensers outside with an AC unit, and so I think that's what we're showing. And then they would all have to be compliant with any noise regulation. We're not asking for any relief from that.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to quickly add to that. At this time, the heat pump units, I think, were shown as like placeholders on the site plan, not necessarily proposed exactly in their location. They will be reviewed at the time of building permit and will be reviewed against all the noise code. And they will need to be compliant with the required noise ordinance with a minimum setback of 3 feet from side and rear lot lines, and potentially not permitted in the front yards unless they're properly screened with a fence. And they will need to account for, the minimum distance and the noise, maximum noise allowance.
Yeah, I'm surprised to hear about the 3 because, like, usually it's even if you take a relatively quiet unit, it has to be at least 6 or 7 feet from the property line.
Yeah, about 2 years ago, the ordinance, I think the incentive was that homeowners would be using electric units now, which tend to be much quieter than the previous units. So for the last 2 years, staff has been reviewing this against the minimum 3-foot setback to the heat pump units. And when you start placing multiple units together, we do also take the weighted sound, not just of the one unit. Something to consider. But this will be reviewed formally at the time of building permit when the spec sheets are provided.
Thank you. While you're speaking, Nishira, like how about the issues with the windows overlooking the neighbor? Are there some rules about obscuring windows and not just increasing the sill height, but like obscuring below 5 feet?
Absolutely. If we look at each individual single-family home, let's say this wasn't a part of a subdivision and it wasn't a part of a larger project, they would be subject to the individual review privacy guidelines, which do require a certain sill height. Or if you are providing low sill windows, then we would need context of the property and then provide or request obscure glazing from the applicant. In the case of this project, since they are requesting waivers, they are also able to request a waiver for that. However, if privacy is of significance, we can push back and ask them to change the design of the windows or placement of the windows and ask them to provide obscure glazing. So that is within your realms to comment on that.
Great.
Martin, can I just ask a related question about that?
Please.
In a subdivision, is the obscured, are the rules different for obscured windows between units?
Not necessarily for a subdivision specifically. I just meant since this project is coming forward to the ARB for consideration, the IR guidelines don't apply to this project. Hence, it wasn't reviewed against those guidelines, but privacy is 100% still of importance, and we would need to take that into account.
And then my next question is, it looks like you have a 6-foot fence almost the entire length of Arrastradero Road, and then also the side street, right?
I think that the fence is something that we still need to work out, actually. I think we had a comment this last round, so that's something, I'm not sure that it's going to be a 6-foot fence. I think it might be lower along Arrastradero, so we're going to continue to work with the city on that.
Yeah. I mean, it would not be, please.
The fence regulations, if you are placing a fence facing the street or parallel to the street, within the first 16 feet along those streets, they would need to be 4 feet in height. And then within the view triangle at the intersection of Old Trace and Astudero, it would need to be 3 feet. And the same actually applies to the signage that you brought up previously. So that's something that I did comment on in the past round, and the applicant is working on revising that.
Okay. And thank you. That's it.
If there is no more questions, then we will just move on to internal discussions and comments. Who want to start?
And this is not, we're not voting on anything today. This is really just advisement and sort of that.
Yeah.
Okay. I just have a set of final thoughts, but I can wait.
Sure. Yeah. Anyone? You want to continue?
Sure. Yeah, so for me, the safety concerns raised by the neighbors seem very substantial. And I mean, I understand, we asked the transportation consultants and this consultant and that consultant. But I think when 30 people, show up to a meeting to raise safety issues, I don't think we can, necessarily, trust those, if the consultant stays safe, but literally everybody who lives in that neighborhood says it's not safe. I mean, there is something wrong with that analysis. So, at this point, I don't trust that analysis. And, we are just commenting, so this is just my comment. So I think those need to be taken more seriously. There were several mentions of the fire truck not being able to, to go in because of parked cars. Several people mentioned that there was mentioning of a VTA and is not being able to, go in. So I think that's very critical, and we have to understand that there is going to be more, more traffic and more parking. Requiring more parking is probably not what we will do, or we can do. But it's there will be more traffic, more parking on the street, and I think this is one of the things. Is like how did the traffic analysis not show that? I mean, yes, from a code standpoint, we cannot require cars more parking. But the reality is, these huge homes, like some of these homes are over 4,000 square feet. I mean, they're going to have a lot of cars. They're going to have guests. I mean, it's just a fact. So, all these cars will be on the street. So there has to be some more thinking about it. That would be my comment. Like, is it maybe, introducing parking passes for Old Trace Road? I also heard a comment that there are people from VMware working on parking on Old Trace. It's like, at a minimum, those people have to leave. So, I think there are a lot of possible solutions to this. But like right now, there is no solution. So I think there has to be a solution. And then I think also, in terms of the sidewalk, I think that's important. I think while this community was more like a rural community, it was okay not to have a sidewalk, but now the character of the neighborhood is changing. So I think that's just a fact, and elderly residents being able to walk, children being able to walk, I think that's is critical. So not just as part of this project, but like in general, I think maybe the planning team can think about having a sidewalk in this neighborhood and how that will look like. So I think that's very critical. And for me, it's like unless this can be solved, to me, I don't think this project is even feasible. I mean, I hope it can be solved, but I think these safety issues are real. And I think, talking about like obscure windows and, I mean, that's kind of small things, but I think the safety is the number one. Like, I don't see that, fulfilled. So that's number one. And then, I'm concerned about the privacy to the neighbors. So I think obscuring the windows, more landscaping, I think that would be good, in terms of comments. I think, the buildings are very high, I think unnecessarily. I think, you have those partial basement, you call them partial basement. I mean, basically, the first floor is like 4 or 5 feet above the ground level. So you're already starting the first floor at 4 foot high, and then you are piling on 12 feet for the first floor, another 10 for the second floor. That's how you get to these huge buildings. And I think going deeper in the basement it's going to be more expensive. So maybe you don't want to do that. But I think that's where kind of the problems start with this project is with that half basement, that makes the buildings even higher. So I think that's just the feedback. And then, just kind of a comment about the signage. I think this home is part of the Esther Park neighborhood. It's not the Oak neighborhood, but it's the Esther Park neighborhood. I think if I'm buying a house there, I'm not going to feel I'm in a separate neighborhood. And I think it's also, if I was living in Esther Park, and then you create this separate development here, I think it's almost like a punch in the face. Like, you're not part of the community. You are already saying you're not part of the community. So I think that could be a nice gesture to the community to be, rather than, creating a barrier, around this, try to make it part of a larger thing. And like we spoke about the fence. So I think these would be my comments.
Who want to be next? David?
Started with being responsive to the community's concern about the end of trace. And I think that the comments that were just made about the area, that all of us have been making really basically, that it is kind of pedestrian unfriendly. And you tend to want to develop your own project and not think of the community's concerned that much, but understand the mindset for that. But I think it's an error not to be clearly aware that the community has a lot of problems with that. And it's where the traffic backs up and the community access is and egress is. And I don't understand really why a one-way street isn't a reasonable idea. And it requires a lot of coordination with the city for it to work. But it makes a huge difference to the end of trace to deal with it that way. I agree also with my fellow board members' comments about raising the houses. These are aggressively upper-class kind of houses here that are being put on in this site. And it's, you look at the cover sheet, it's a very intense little development. I mean, to me, that some of these problems are severe enough that I would have thought that less housing would be better in this neighborhood. Understand that you're working against purchase price, et cetera, all these other issues, sort of the business aspect of it, but I think it's kind of in conflict with the transportation, and it's in conflict in a way with itself because of the lack of capacity to really provide the services that these very houses are going to really require in terms of people who will be coming, visitors, the parking issues, the density of it is really too much for the size of the site. And there's no flexibility here. You've kind of used up all of your flexibility in forcing the houses into this location. And they are aggressively big houses. Reducing the scale of them somehow would make it more comfortable in this neighborhood. I personally have a lot of issues with the way in which they're designed. I don't see why in a little development like this you have to be so individual with each house to make them look unique relative to their neighbors. In a way, my personal feeling is it's nicer to have some modesty about the materials you use, so that talking about them as, oh, this is Spanish style, or this is modern style, and it's really not either modern nor Spanish, in my opinion. And that's having looked at lots of those kinds of houses throughout Palo Alto. Some of them being really, really Spanish, you know, and you really get a different flavor of them, where they're like a wall on the street, you know, arch thing, and then the backyard is really the important area. And the scale is usually a lot lower. So I'm not really thrilled about the idea of the way they're designed. That's my opinion. Others could react as they choose here. But in particular, you look at the first two houses on the corner here on the cover sheet, and then you look at this little guy over here that's the other end of it, and it doesn't look like it belongs there at all. It's the scale is off. I know that you run into these problems, that the kind of the way in which these have to be so many units in order to apply for not being investigated further into the details of, you know, into review process. But I frankly think it would be a much better project if it were 3 or 4 houses than it is, because being 6. Am I right here? 2, 4, 6, 7. At the end of it here, you have a lot of cars coming out of the very end of the side, sort of the end of the street here. The density of cars pulling in and out of units is extreme at that end. Makes me feel that getting out and going either way from that particular location would be a good choice. I'm always kind of bothered by the JDUs, and others here have been as well. I just think that you don't, for example, mention that some of these houses that have JDUs are not having grandmothers, but they're rather having live-in people helping with the family situation, and you're sticking them into rather unpleasant areas. And that's the reality, you know. So let's face up to the reality of the JDU. What does it serve? You know, I think that I've seen this used in various locations, and the JDUs become a kid's playroom or whatever, some other use that isn't residential. I frankly just am not happy with the fact that this is a dense, such a dense little development, and it's kind of, there's no way whether you save trees, because I looked at a big empty lot, there weren't very many trees there. That the fact of the matter is, it's too dense for this neighborhood, and I think you mentioned that. Really, it's a single-family neighborhood, very much a single-family neighborhood, and if you had 3 or 4 houses, you might be able to squeeze it on and do it with enough open space. Another thing is that you have houses with 3 or 4 bedrooms. You're going to have a ton of kids here, and there isn't any place for play. You know, everything is very, very tight. You know, you don't have any place for a basketball, so they're going to stick that basketball thing right out in the street, you know, and that's going to mean that they have to play in the street. That's not so bad, but because it's a low-density neighborhood, but wouldn't it be nice if there were some place outside that were public space for the kids to play? It really kind of, when you get to this density, you really need something like that. Those are my feelings about it. I looked at the material board, and you mix different stones, different, you know, and we haven't talked about the aesthetic at all, hardly, here. But aesthetically, I think that there's just so much variety of material. I just prefer to see a simpler, more organized little community of materials for houses like this, instead of every house has to be kind of its own aggressive expression of a style that isn't even really a style, as I mentioned it. That's all.
All right, to the applicant, to the public, thank you guys both for your comments. It's sincerely appreciated. And again, I deeply sympathize with the neighbors, as I am a local resident there myself for my whole life. So very familiar with this street and intersection and lot. This is a case as a perfect example of how state mandated issues are eroding the fabric of our neighborhoods. We have mandates in place that are to increase housing, which is desperately needed. However, the way that these rules are written, they sort of sweep across neighborhoods regardless of what the character of the street is, and our hands become tied. And it really is one of those situations where there's always a could be worse, right? But there's also a could be better. And this is one of those situations where even at the applicant's own commentary was that this could have been a 6-unit development. Because of the way the state mandates are written, it incentivizes them to do 16, which is a huge difference. And for the street of Old Trace Road being where it is, being in the location it is, being, you know, an older road, it's a windy road, it's got the beautiful little cul-de-sacs tucked back there. This is not the project that fits well with it. However, to the architect and the applicant, again, I hate to use this term, but it could be worse, right? It could be a lot worse. I actually appreciate the fact that they're trying to go for single-family units, that they are smaller, that it is lower density than it could have been. All that being said, we do need housing, which is tough. It's just hard to look at it in a place like this and say it really doesn't belong here. But there's not so much we can do. It is where it's going to be. Now, how do we make the best of the situation? For me personally, I think that there's absolutely no question that the city needs to work with this development and make that intersection a stop sign at a bare minimum. Like no flashing lights, that's not going to be enough. This needs a full stop sign. You need to be able to get on and off of Old Trace Road with some protection. As you go further down towards Primarissima at 280, there's a stop sign there as well. This could be another one. Maybe it's not a street light, but a stop sign at a minimum is going to make this entire intersection safer. I think that the sidewalk is kind of necessary along Old Trace Road as well. As my fellow board member said, you're changing the fabric of this entrance to this street by putting this high density here. And as much as we all love trees, I will always support people and safety over trees. So if there's one tree blocking this sidewalk, then that tree needs to go, in my mind. There should be a sidewalk, there should be safety for the kids getting from Old Trace across Arastradero. There's a beautiful pedestrian walkway, the full length of Arastradero. It goes all the way from Gunn, all the way over towards 280, and then up the hill. That needs to be accessible, and that needs to be accessible for these units that are being developed. It needs to be accessible for everybody up on Old Trace Road, and it needs to be safely accessible. I also like the idea of having a speed bump in this area. That's something that would slow people down at this intersection. Maybe it's a stop sign and a speed bump, something like that. But getting this on board and safe for the neighbors is sort of non-negotiable at this point. And I think the city really does need to take that seriously and do what they can to encourage and promote and make that process a little bit smoother. Parking on Old Trace Road should be either prohibited for everybody, or it should be with, as board member Jojo said, maybe it's parking passes, and that if you are a member of, if you're a resident of Old Trace Road or any of the subsequent cul-de-sacs, Mockingbird Lane, things like that, you can apply and get a parking permit to be on this street. There should be absolutely no excuse for VMware people parking on it. That's they've got a whole parking lot. There should be no reason for that. That being said, I understand that for Rose Drive residences, they're going to have a tough time with parking. That shouldn't be an overflow of 12 more cars onto Old Trace Road, prohibiting traffic for people and prohibiting egress. So that really does need to be managed, mitigated, and well thought out. Trying to keep in order from biggest to smallest here. Guest parking or two for Rose Drive, I think, is a great idea, seeing where you can fit it in, something like that. You're going to have, as people said, the Amazon deliveries, the DoorDash deliveries, things like that. While driveways are great and definitely useful, I think if you can maneuver a guest parking spot or two, I think that would be definitely well worth the effort. Going on to the actual units themselves. I think that the three modern units, truth be told, I find that the first two units, the sort of Spanish style and the traditional, contemporary, those are quite lovely. I think their scale is too tall. I think they can be reduced. That would be a nice effort for the neighbors to put in. But those are quite lovely. It's the modern ones seem a bit out of place. Again, I live near Brioni's, and we had a development over in Maybell where there was a similar style. It was a large lot that used to be an apricot orchard. They took it and made it into a bunch of single-family units. The disjointedness between the aesthetics of those buildings drives me nuts on a daily basis. One of them is hyper-modern, and the other one is blue and shingled. And you have 2 out of 3 here that are really complementary. I think dialing in that modern aesthetic to be a little bit more complementary to the first 2 would be worth the effort. And on that note, potentially softening those corners, making sloped roofs instead of maybe the flat roofs, reducing the parapets, something along those lines. Looking at the actual floor plans themselves, your basement plans need improvement across all 3 of them. The junior ADUs, as fellow board members have said, are sort of questionable. On lot 2, the junior ADU doesn't even have a light well around it, nor does the flex space. So your light and air calculations really need to be reevaluated and redone. On lot 1, there's a junior ADU, so there's a teeny tiny light well for the flex space and a pretty big light well for the utility space. Logically, that's not making sense to me. Maybe combine them and give it a bigger light well, or why does the utility need a light well at all? That's for all 3 of the basement spaces. They all show utilities with the utility room with light and air, which is not actually necessary. So we'd want to, keep an eye on that and make sure that's actually a utility room and not being converted to something else in future. Final comments, dewatering. As we work in Palo Alto, dewatering is always an issue, and having subterranean large slopes to flow water down into garages and basements is problematic. So to the civil engineer, keeping a firm eye on that and understanding the city's dewatering requirements would be well worth it during construction and during the life of these buildings. Final comments are, appreciate your application to the neighbors. I definitely feel your concerns. I take them very personally. I definitely sympathize. And it's one of these situations where we've got a rub, right? We've got the state mandating things, the city having a requirement, and your neighborhood being the one that's impacted by this. So we're going to try and make this the best that we can, but at the end of the day, this is likely going to go forward. So let's figure out the best solution to make sure it's safe for you guys as the neighbors and the residences of the Old Trace Road. Thank you very much. That's all my comments.
I can go next. Thank you to the applicant and neighbors for all of your comments. My fellow board members have commented on all the things that we've been discussing. So I'm going to just mainly focus on this one thing that bothers me about this project is lack of inclusivity in like various ways. And that the subdivision really feels like you're trying to be an island within this neighborhood. And I think yes, it's all about economics, but being responsive to your neighbors. And these future residents want to be part of Esther Park neighborhood and not be living in a little island where they only talk to the 8 other houses or 16, however you want to count it. So I think that kind of has a lot of implications about, whether it's parking, providing sidewalks, crosswalks, and also being, inclusive within this subdivision as well. And that's kind of why it bothers me a lot that the one BMR unit will be forever obvious as the BMR unit because it's the tiniest thing in this neighborhood. And the junior ADUs, like Board Member Hirsch also mentioned, really looks like, especially the ones that you enter the main house through the pantry, it's really designed for the live-in help to live in the house. And it's, again, creating tiers of residents instead of being inclusive. So I would like you guys to think about, yes, it's more, I'm not trying to ask you to social engineer, but let architecture and your development be inclusive of people who are going to live here. And so think about, like, you asked earlier about the junior ADUs, like you have flex space next to the junior ADU that's, extra space for, I don't know, gym equipment or a TV room, whereas the junior ADU is like barely hitting the 150 square foot minimum requirement. Make that a nicer place, because you know what, that resident is probably going to rent it out to, nearby students or have somebody else live there. Let it be a nice, light well being one of the ways to make it a nicer living experience. So my suggestion is to not create tiers and classes of residents in this neighborhood, but make it inclusive within this development and within the larger neighborhood in Palo Alto that this development is going to be part of. And that, goes to all of the concerns about parking, sidewalk, all of that is about make sure that, you'll create this and sell these units, but people living here want to have a nice living experience for however long they live there, and then the neighbors want to have nice neighbors who are part of that fabric, not a separate fabric. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Thank you for the neighbors coming and for your comments. And I do appreciate your proactive way to reach out to the neighbors and organize the meetings and understand their concerns and understand that there is existing situations and what the potential problems that this project will create it. So I would suggest you to work closely with transportation department and also listen to the neighbors' concern and be realistic and see what the solutions could be at the interactions. And also for the guest parking, as the neighbors' concern about the width of the Old Trace, ideally there is minimum street parking along those streets. So although I like your landscape design, have lots of greeneries created along the private road, in this case, I would suggest you to study more about whether we could eliminate the planters between the private street and the sidewalk. And in that way, we may be able to create some guest parking on site. And that may be reduce the lot 1 and lot 2 a little bit, but it will not impact your the density or the number of the rooms that you created. And also for the building height, I agree with several board members just mentioned. I think it is not necessary to have a 12-foot first floor, and it could be reduced to 10 foot. And also, just for reference, so for the single families in town that going through the area review, typically the first floor will be less than 10 feet. And the garage height for the SB9, I think the play height we require there is 10 foot. But here, some of the garage play height is like over 13 feet or 14 feet, so it's extremely tall than what typically we have in town. And also, I would suggest you to increase the privacy between the adjacent neighbors and what you proposed here. So it's either by maybe reduce the length of the driveway, if possible, so that we can have the opportunity to push that portion of the building a little bit further from the property line. Thus, you will have larger backyard, and also to add more privacy trees along the property line, and maybe some either raise the ceiling height or have the obscure windows along that side. And also, I agree with what Vice Chair Adcock just mentioned about the affordable, the below market rating units here. It seems like it's just kind of awkward to showing up here because of the size of the lot and the size of the unit. It compared to the other unit, it seems like it's extremely small. And if this neighborhood is more like a family-oriented community, then I think to your selling market point, I think it's also good to somehow balance the unit size and the lot size, make the lot 5A and 5B a little bit bigger. And that's all my comments. And thank you so much for your time and efforts. And we don't need a motion for this project, so that concludes this action item. And shall we have a 5-minute break before we approve the meeting minutes?
I would say we just got meeting minutes left. Let's just go through it.
Okay. So we will have 2 meeting minutes to approve. The first one is December 4th, 2025. Do we have any modifications for these 2? No? And
move to approve the minutes as written.
Yeah.
Second?
Can we have a vote for December 4th meeting, please?
Yes. Board Member Hirsch? Yes. Board Member Jodar?
Yes.
Board Member Rosenberg?
Yes.
Vice Chair Adcock?
Yes.
Chair Chen?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
And for meeting minutes, January 15th, 2026, do we have any additions?
And then through the chair, I did want to make a note that Vice Chair Adcock and Board Member Hirsch were absent from this meeting, so I would need them to abstain from this when I call for a vote.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I move to approve the minutes as written.
I'll second.
All right. Board Member Jojarth?
Yes.
Board Member Rosenberg?
Yes.
Board Member Hirsch?
Yes.
Abstain.
I'm not supposed to say.
You have to say I abstain.
Absent. Okay.
Yeah, okay. Vice Chair Chen, Adcock?
Abstain, yeah.
Chair Chen?
Yes.
Motion carries 302 with 2 abstentions.
Okay, thank you. And next is board member questions, comments, and announcement. So I want to share with the board that our work plan last year is approved on February 2nd. And the city council would like us to add the SB 79 as a project for this year. And also, they endorse ARB's recommendation to expand the objective standards of residential to townhomes. And they also endorse our efforts to coordinate and streamline the work between the HRB and PTC. And kudos to our staff. And we know that there is an upcoming joint meeting next week. So we're looking forward to that.
And just as a quick question, for the joint meeting next week, we do need to be here in person, or if we need to attend via Zoom, do we need to report that ahead of time?
Great question. So that would need to be reported ahead of time. I believe that we have sent out the agenda already, but we could make an amendment if there's a justified reason for virtual attendance.
The intent is to attend in person, but I am without much backup that day. So in case something goes wrong, I just want to hedge my bets here, but it should be there in person.
Okay.
All right, if no more comments, then meeting adjourned.